we are joined with Melik Abdul, the celeb himself. Been killing it on CNN, my man. When I came in today, I was like, Malik has been killing it on CNN. You've been handling your business, my man. Political consultant. Wait a minute, political analyst. I don't know if you do political consultation, but definitely political analyst, writer, Republican strategist, 15 years of public and private sector experience, and my former co-host. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I think we're going to start off with a good stream today. I'm hoping here. I'm using my phone because I realized that I did another StreamYard. Apparently, it's something with StreamYard because I did another StreamYard and it was the same issue. So I'm using my phone, so we shouldn't have a problem.
It could be. I know, like, for example, StreamYard doesn't work with Iran. So anytime you're trying to bring somebody on from Iran, StreamYard just doesn't work. Anytime I try to bring up Iran or something like that, it failed miserably. It just would not connect. So yeah, it could be StreamYard. It could just be the way to do the data packets or something. Welcome to the show, man. You doing all right?
I'm doing pretty good. Of course, it's been a busy few days here after my little CNN interview. And the ironic thing, and as I've been telling people, of course, my DMs have been full. When I say full, you got the MAGA wing who are just hopping John mad that I was critical and objective in my criticism of Donald Trump. And for people who don't know, there was a segment talking about
right here. I'm not gonna play it. Right here. I'm gonna play my man because he handled his business. Frank Luntz is so full of shit. He is massively full of shit in this clip. And look, I don't have a bias per se against Frank Luntz. I mean, during the election, he did some good stuff in regards to some of the polling and stuff like that he was doing. In this clip, he is out of his mind. I'm going to play the clip of Frank Luntz and get her take on it, but I want to play you first. So this is Melik on CNN doing God's work. And just to prep the audience on this, the crash, just so the audience knows what we're talking about. There was a crash with the Black Hawk helicopter running into an airplane. And when that took place, and when that crash took place, a horrible tragedy. I mean, it took place in DC. And we're like, okay, what the hell? Like, how does that happen? I mean, there wasn't radar, the pilot couldn't see it, the helicopter couldn't see it. Like, all of this stuff is very weird. Donald Trump comes out and says this, which honestly is one of the most racist things I've ever heard in my life, to be frank. This is Trump responding to that crash.
Came out with a directive to white, and we want the people that are competent.
How you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash?
Because I have common sense.
Because I have common sense. Diversity has something to do with the crash, and Trump knows because he has common sense. All right. So Melik goes on CNN, and Melik points out this is ridiculous. And he calls these people the woke right. The woke right. I love this. So this is Melik on CNN. This was a couple of days ago.
I know. Instead of, I know a number of people who voted for Donald Trump for the first time. They were so disgusted than what they felt was happening in the Biden administration. I talked to many of them this week. Instead of talking about the economy, I was fielding questions on whether or not the Trump administration wanted to stop commemorating Black History Month, Women's History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month.
This is the directive at a lot of the agencies, but DOD today put out a memo saying no more celebration of history months.
Or Holocaust Remembrance Day or MLK
So
Day.
I was fielding all of these questions. So when people said that they voted for Donald Trump because they were concerned about, the price of eggs and all of these type of things, because of Donald Trump's own doing, we're having to have this conversation about DEI. DEI, for many people, and I call them the woke right, it has become a stand-in for being Black and unqualified. And what I would like for the Trump administration to do, Susie Wiles, I love her, never met her, want to meet her one day. I want them to ask the team, what was our message coming out of this week? And if they say that they felt as if it was successful, then we're going to have a very long 4 years.
Can I make a
Brother, preach. The woke right. The woke right. And Abby goes further into that when she brings up this whole thing of like, maybe it's not people tolerate it. Maybe many on the side just accept it, meaning this is what they sign up for. This is, it's a feature. It's not a bug per se, in which case Frank Luntz lost his mind over the comment. Give me your take on this. So expand upon that. Because I know on TV, you only get 30 seconds for like a soundbite or something to that effect. But I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. Nobody voted for people would accept a president having a pet project on the side, right? Like if I was in the UFOs, they may be okay with me looking into the UFO files because they know that's my thing. Providing I do the other stuff that I said I was going to do. I'm going to deal with the economy. I'm going to deal with the foreign policy stuff. I'm going to deal with all that. They'll give you a pet project. It is a different animal for there to be, let's say, a crash. And your response is, well, Pete Buttigieg is at fault and Joe Biden is at fault. And they keep hiring these people who are unqualified, who just so happen to also be Black or a woman. And we need to get rid of African American month. And we need to get rid of the Hispanic month. Right. And we need to get rid of, and it's like, okay, dude, nobody voted for you for that. That didn't even come up. And say he was going to get rid of Black History Month. I mean, just nonsense.
And that's why I made the point. And of course, it caused their heads to explode about the woke right. Because the woke right, they are interested in that stuff. And I described the woke right in a number of ways, but definitely they are obsessed with race. As they criticize the left for focusing on identity,
they do
the woke right is solely focused on identity. They are focused on race. They are focused on gender. They are focused on sexuality. And in fact, they wake up every single day to give you an example, according to them, of how DEI has failed. You heard, or for those who didn't watch the hearing with Pete Hegseth, who by all accounts was not, it's hard to make the argument that Pete Hegseth was a merit-based choice. He was white, he was male, he was heterosexual, and he was conservative. That makes him automatically qualified. So when Donald Trump decided to jump into this whole DEI thing without any sort of evidence, and then had to, in a press pool, later clarified that he didn't have any information that DEI was responsible for this. What Donald Trump and many of the people on the woke right are referring to when they say, this whole thing about the lawsuit, 1,000 people were denied jobs or something because of their race. They don't dig a little deeper to understand that the organization representing all of these people, it is a race neutral group of people that they are representing. The person who has been out front happens to be a white male. So the assumption is, even though it's not even true, based on the organization that's defending, that filed the lawsuit, the assumption is that it was 1,000 white people who were denied. It's literally not true. Not only is that not true, when you go and look at the numbers, I think about 73% of air traffic controllers are white. 80% of them are white men. I think there's about 6%, maybe 3 to 6% of air traffic controllers who are Black. Donald Trump decided to go down this DEI rabbit hole because it satisfies the woke right, who are absolutely fine with DEI meaning being Black and unqualified. I've said many times before that I think that there are elements of this whole DEI industry where they did themselves in. So this whole notion of anti-racist training, where you're going to unlearn racism and you're forcing your employees to take these anti-racist training. School districts across the country that, as a matter of, as part of the application, forced elementary age students to sign anti-racist pledges in order to be accepted into the school. Like, that is DEI gone beyond. But there are elements of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I go back to all the time that Donald Trump, even though it wasn't DEI to him, but it definitely was in practice when he said that he would only choose for his next Supreme Court justice, no men were allowed. He would only nominate a woman to replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That is DEI. The woke right don't want to call it that. Donald Trump don't want to call it that, but that is DEI. When Justice Brett Kavanaugh, for his first law clerk class, when he became justice, he hired only female law clerks. Men were not allowed. No white men were allowed. You never heard discussions of Justice Coney Barrett being a DEI pick. When Joe Biden, though, said that he would choose a black woman, then all of a sudden that became DEI. When you look at Claudine Gay, even though I had criticisms of how she responded, the former president of Harvard, how she responded to, I think that was the anti-Semitism or assumed such on college campuses. Right. Even if it's fine if you want to be critical of her, I was critical of her. But because Joe Biden said that he would choose a black woman, she automatically became unqualified, even though at Stanford, at Harvard, where she served in administrative capacities, not just as a professor, she served in administrative capacities, but to them, that meant black and unqualified. So like I say, they're in my DMs. Of course, the angry left is doing what it's always done since I started my media career. They're the Uncle Toms, the Coons, all of that stuff. But the woke right, though, they're mad. There is no such thing as the woke right. How could it has nothing to do with race? Well, then explain to me, what did Donald Trump mean when he said that it impacted white people?
You could
The
see
whole
it all the
FAA
time
hiring
on Twitter. It's they act like these people are out in the wood, like, in the forest somewhere by themselves. They tell you at every opportunity what they think about that stuff. And they are perfectly on board for that type of talk. I mean, do you remember when we had the bridge crash in Baltimore?
Sure
and
did.
where that barge effectively hit the bridge, it destroyed all of that stuff. And some of the stuff that was coming out was like the mayor was a DEI hire. As if
Brandon.
it had anything to do with the fact that a barge went uncontrolled and ran into a bridge. Like, this is nonsense.
They're attacking. I'm sure you've read about it, but if your audience hasn't, this the family of the female co-pilot at this this crash at Reagan Airport, they refused to release her name. Now, we don't know what the rationale was, but they refused to release her name because what was happening at the time is that you had people sharing that the main pilot, who was the trainer, apparently had 1,000 hours, but it was this female co-pilot who had 500 hours of training experience. No one knows what the threshold is. No one knew anything about it, but because she was a woman, and then they said, okay, we're going to find a random photo because somebody said that she worked in some capacity at the White House. They found a random photo of a white female Biden staffer, circled her face and started attacking her. It wasn't even the woman who died. It wasn't even the woman who died. They immediately went into attack mode to blame this white woman who did work. And in fact, I think her family later came out with a statement saying that she had served over a decade, I think maybe even 19 years, but definitely over a decade in the military. So she wasn't unqualified. She's done that job before. It was a freak accident, but it had nothing to do with DEI. And I'm going to continue to say it despite how it may upset people. This is an extension. See, years ago, the conversation we were having, you turn on the television, it was critical race theory. Everybody was an expert on critical race theory. You heard, and every time I have no idea what it means, or critical race theory. But
or affirmative action. That was the other
or
one.
affirmative action, even though, as the studies have proven over and over again, the largest beneficiaries of affirmative action are white women. When you look at, and I encourage your audience to Google DEI execs, and you will find, I think about 65 or so percent of those in these DEI executive positions are white people. Of course they are. And this is the same across industries. The woke right decided that, even though I didn't agree with Al Sharpton's, we're going to go and, stand firm with Costco, and he's marching in Costco because they want to maintain their DEI policies.
Yeah.
If you look at the actual numbers, I went back and looked, 70%, actually almost 80% of Costco's executives are white. About 80% of them are white. So this notion that somehow DEI, Pete Hegseth, in his confirmation hearing, he went into the confirmation hearing, he's going to get the woke out of the military. He was not able to provide one example of how DEI has negatively impacted the readiness of our military. Not one example. And so what he started doing over the past few days is that he said that there was an informal quota system at the Department of Defense that he was going to get rid of. Bruh, informal means that it don't exist. This is just something that you made up. There is no informal quota system, which is why when media has asked, well, give us an example. There was a Republican who gave one example, and that example is that they changed the language from like you could no longer use mother or dad or something like that, but it was around language. It had nothing to do with readiness. It had nothing to do with readiness. But this is what they continue to push. And a lot of this is informed by the woke right. And I'd also say Elon Musk, because he pushes this type of stuff. And it is disappointing to me because I'm looking at this. I said, okay, once Donald Trump becomes president, Susie Wiles is going to close ranks. She's going to grab control of this. But it doesn't seem like that's happening at all, because I made the point in the video because I wanted her, because I name checked her. I wanted them to understand that at the end of the first week, Donald Trump talked about DEI. Great. Eliminate all the executive orders regarding DEI and all of this type of stuff. But it was at the end of last week where we were still talking about DEI, not the fact that when I went to the grocery store on yesterday, my local grocery store, that I was getting ready to buy me some eggs, though for a dozen of eggs, it's $7.99.
I know.
And I live in the quote unquote hood. $7.99 for a dozen of eggs. So we weren't talking about any of Donald Trump's economic policies. We were barely talking about immigration in the second week. The message going out towards the end of last week was DEI. You had Pete Hegseth still doubling down on it. You had Sean Duffy falling over himself trying to associate it with DEI. You had JD Vance trying to, are you talking about somebody drawing a crooked line to the truth? He was literally out there saying, well, no, okay, there is no evidence that this particular crash was the cause, due to DEI. However, if you look back over the years at the policies that the Biden administration has taken, DEI may be responsible for staffing changes. These staffing shortages existed under Donald Trump.
Exactly.
These staffing shortages existed under Barack Obama. They existed under Donald Trump, and they existed under Joe Biden. So I've been asking people, so when the FAA had these staffing shortages when Trump was in office, what did he do?
And by the way, the same policy, meaning there has been no policy shift. It's the same policy since Trump was in office to Joe Biden in office to now. So nothing has fundamentally changed in a policy standpoint. Oh, there we are.
What Barack Obama did, there was some type of change that Barack Obama during his administration made around recruiting and things like that. Congress passed a law in 2018 to end that. The lawsuit that Trump and all of these others are referencing stems from 2014 when Barack Obama was in office. So from 2014 to 2018, the policy ended in 2018. So this was during Trump's administration. So then what did the Trump administration do to change that? Nothing. They're talking now, and I get all wonky, but I'm sure many people have heard them talk about that the FAA was hiring people with, soliciting hires from people with, intellectual disabilities and all of this type of stuff. This is something else that I want your audience to Google. Google Schedule A hiring authority. The Schedule A hiring authority has existed in government probably at least for about 20 plus years. And it clearly states, so when you go and apply for a federal job, it will ask you, and in fact, not even a federal job, if you apply for a private sector job, they ask, do you have any sort of, I forgot how they just, right. But under that, we're talking about everything from they call it disability. Do you have any type of disability that you would like to disclose?
That's right.
And some websites will give you examples of what that is, meaning it can be anything from diabetes, congestive heart failure. If you have a history of HIV, if you have a history of PTSD, it is literally in a federal hiring authority. So Donald Trump and the people around him don't even know that the federal government has had this for years, and the private sector still uses that. It doesn't give you a leg up over anybody else, unlike veterans, because veterans, depending on where you are, don't have to go through the competitive process. It is a consideration that agencies can use. And what does that look like? At the Department of Veterans Affairs, where I work, as they're talking about disabled people, if you walk through VA headquarters, you will see people in wheelchairs. You will see people with missing limbs. You will work with employees who have PTSD, who are actually working at the VA on 100% disability. This is at the Veterans Affairs headquarters in Washington, D.C. So this notion that somehow, oh my goodness, FAA, they're hiring people with intellectual disabilities. Well, the entire government has solicited that. And if you don't believe me, Google Schedule A hiring authority.
Mm-hmm. There's also the Americans with Disabilities Act, right?
It probably came out of that. It could have come out of, I'm not totally sure. I'm going to look that up, but it very likely came from the ADA.
Yeah, but you can't somebody if they have if I may have an illness, but the illness may not affect my job, especially if there could be minor provisions that you can do to effectively help it. I mean, the entire point was for you not to discriminate. And against the VA, I mean, these people effectively gave their bodies for their country. How do you turn around and tell them, providing it's not a situation, if the person lost their eyesight, I don't want them flying an airplane, but that's kind of a given, right? If the person is PTSD, that doesn't stop them or negate them from working a job at all, especially, maybe not necessarily a flight, but at the very least working at the VA or working at some other capacity. Yeah, they gave their lives for this country in real terms. I don't know, man. It's a bit rich that because according to Trump and according to many of his acolytes, unless it is a white man, then they're suspect.
White heterosexual man.
Thank you. Because people judge as a gay man, and that makes him a DEI hire right off the bat.
Yeah.
And as I was telling my mom, I was like, it has nothing to do with Buttigieg being gay, as him being unqualified. Meaning Joe Biden put him in that spot for electoral reasons, not because he was good at the job. Like there's a difference in those things. It has nothing to do with his sexuality. It has nothing to do with anything else other than him just being bad at that job.
And the woke right and I think we talked, I think we did maybe talk about it a little when we had the show, but they've been sharing as an example to kind of prove that Donald Trump is right about Joe Biden and this focus on DEI. They've been sharing this hearing, the Senate confirmation hearing of Phil Washington. If you guys remember, this was the black guy that Biden had nominated for FAA administrator who couldn't answer certain questions about aviation or something. But if you Google it, if you Google Phil Washington, you'll see many on the woke right sharing that as an example of how Biden was so focused on DEI that he didn't care about qualifications. Now, I'm one of those who said that maybe Phil Washington wasn't the right pick for FAA administrators. But prior to even being nominated, he had spent 6 years as the assistant manager of Denver's regional authority, which is kind of like their transit authority. He had spent, I think, 7 years as the CEO of LA Metro Transit Authority. So he had actually had more, and 24 years in the military. He had served in the military longer than Pete Hegseth. He retired at a higher rank than Pete Hegseth. He had had more executive experience than Pete Hegseth. He had managed larger budgets than Pete Hegseth. But for the woke right, he was the unqualified DEI pick, and Pete Hegseth was based solely on merit.
Well, it's skin makes him better, Malik. He is the white skin. I mean, like, this is like when it was pointed out to Luntz that this was racist on its face.
I didn't talk about it.
Yeah, but it's like when that's pointed out to Luntz, and Luntz's response to that is, well, people should stop talking about race. It's like, dude, we are having this conversation because Trump came out and said this nonsense. Meaning into the water.
And that's the point that I made, later on in that clip. I made the point is that the reason we're talking about this is because of Donald Trump. We didn't have to be talking about this week. Donald Trump decided to talk about it. And after the show, we stood around with Abby. It was about another 15 minutes where Abby and Frank were going back and forth on this whole DEI thing. And Frank was trying to explain the sentiment of the Trump voter and how they don't want to be called racist. What Frank refused to do in them, and I know how this stuff works, and I know how when people are being too cute by half. Frank agreed with us that Donald Trump shouldn't be talking about this, but he felt compelled. He took it upon himself to then speak for the aggrieved Trump voter, who in fact had nothing to do with the discussion at all. We weren't even talking about Trump voters. We were talking about Donald Trump's decision to blame DEI. But Frank's response, and that's why it was a bit of gaslighting there, because Frank then responds, but we should stop talking about race. Well, if we should stop talking about race, we need to start telling Donald Trump to stop mentioning how white people have been impacted by policies. And that's what that back and forth, and Frank shared it online. He kind of did a little, people were crying about it. They didn't want to give Frank a chance to speak. Now, I don't do that type of stuff, talking over people. I don't try to get into that. But Frank was being very disingenuous because he agreed with us, which was the point that everybody was making. We shouldn't be talking about it. We shouldn't be talking about it. But Donald Trump ensured that we would be talking about it. Let's start and stop there, not defending Trump voters from being called racist and all of that type of stuff, because it actually had nothing to do with the conversation.
Yeah, he was. It was such an aggravating interview. Because then he starts whining about nobody lets me talk. Nobody lets me talk. It's like, dude, you are literally talking now. As you say, nobody is letting you talk. It's just you're not answering.
That was for the camera.
Yeah.
That was for TV.
He wasn't answering what was being put to him. It was a very straightforward thing. It's like, dude, do you really think that without anything to back it up, the president coming out and claiming that a complete tragedy is because people were somehow black or somehow women, you think that's okay? And it's like, well, people should, we need to just stop talking about race. I mean, black people don't want to be a hyphen. They just want to be American. And I've spoken to Trump. It's like, dude, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? That's not what we're asking you right now. We're not the ones who brought up the racial stuff. He brought that up. He decided that that's what he wanted to introduce into the conversation after a tragedy. I mean, it wasn't even, my heart goes out to the family. My heart goes out to this. We're going to do an investigation. No, he knew immediately Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, black people who are unqualified.
Yeah,
it's outrageous. And for whatever reason, Luntz couldn't, get past himself to say, yeah, you're right. That's outrageous. He shouldn't say that. I mean, it's just outrageous. And by the way, there is a DEI conversation, though, that popped up at the DNC convention. I don't know if you've seen this.
My goodness.
Have you seen this? Oh, this is great.
I've seen clips of I've seen that, and the another thing where I think some MSNBC, Jonathan Capehart, Simone Sanders, there was another clip, and I don't know if that was at the convention or not, but it was basically where Jonathan Capehart asks the audience, raise your hand if you think that racism and sexism is why Kamala Harris lost. Well, of course, everybody in the room raised their hand agreeing with that sentiment. They're still grappling with the win. And frankly, now I know who David Hogg is simply because of the whole Stoneman Douglas. I don't pay much attention to him. But the person who is now the chair, I've never heard of him at all. I don't even know who the guy is. They say that he's a wealthy guy, but even at that convention, even at that, whatever it's called, it was clear that Democrats aren't ready to win just yet.
They are out of their minds. And, when people, let's say when like Cenk Uygur, for example, or Anna Kasparian, they've done this kind of turn of sorts of saying, okay, maybe we're getting something wrong. Something is going wrong in this. And they would bring up the whole focus on trans kids and all of this other stuff. And invariably, the left would say, well, wait a minute, that's not something we were focused on in the race. That wasn't really a big deal to us. And it's like, dude, yes, it was. So you decided that y'all wanted to fight on that front. Like, it's as opposed to saying, okay, this idea that this child who doesn't even have the right to vote, who can't drink alcohol, can totally cut his balls off. And you think that's okay. That's unacceptable. Like, that's literally mutilation. Don't give me this nonsense. Like, oh, well, he knew. Nonsense. The kid can't even drink yet. The kid is not even allowed to vote yet. His frontal cortex hasn't even been developed yet. And you guys are so ideologically wed to this particular issue that you think it is okay, in some cases, not even to tell the parents. Like, this is outrageous. They decided they wanted to fight on that. And as evidence of it, the fact that they were giving Uygur such a hard time for even bringing it up gets across how out of their mind and whacked out they are on this stuff. So,
and you know what? I think that because I'm not from his past history, that's why I'm not a big fan of Uygur. Because I've seen what they've done in the past when it comes to, but I do believe that there is at least a bit of sincerity in how they're going about this post-election. That is much different from people like, for instance, Charlemagne the God, who on one hand, he wants to blame, continue to attack Democrats, saying, you said that Donald Trump was, a Nazi and all of this type of stuff, yet you're normalizing him when he was the person who was out there calling Donald Trump a fascist, challenging Anderson Cooper on national television to call him a fascist. And now Charlemagne the God is on all of the networks criticizing Democrats, criticizing Obama for sitting beside Donald Trump in a church, having a conversation with him. So there are people out there like we shouldn't be talking to Donald Trump at all. Really? He's the president of the United States. So people like him, I don't consider them sincere. Even Stephen A. Smith, for those, the sports guy, Stephen A. Smith, who now says that he regrets voting for Kamala Harris. Why? How is it that 2 weeks into Donald Trump's administration, you regret? No, you are straddling the fence. And that's my point about like Charlemagne and some of these others who literally just stuck their finger up to see which way the wind blows because they're being political weather vanes. I don't think that Uber and some of those others are really being political.
Yeah, I don't take Uyghur as being a weather vane per se. I think he is literally in this mindset of, okay, we're getting something wrong. Like something is fundamentally wrong with this. And, you know, there may be a cynical element to it where he is also trying to get more viewers, considering that the fact that Donald Trump won, he may know that
that's a part of it.
Yeah. But I don't take it as being, and my audience completely disagrees with me on this, overtly and radically cynical in the way that some of these other people are. I think there's an element of sincerity to it of, okay, we are getting something wrong.
Right.
So this, I guess my point, that's a lot of wood chop. I guess my point is, when you see this clip, this gets across, they've learned nothing. Don't give me this nonsense that, oh no, this wasn't our issue. This wasn't an issue that we really brought up. This wasn't a thing we had a big deal about. Listen to, he is going to try to explain the voting process because they've added a non-binary quality to the voting. It's bizarre. I'm going to let him explain it himself. And tell me if you understand this, because he had to bring another woman on to help explain this because it was so weird. This is the DNC thing.
Specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. So again, this is what we have to do for this vice chair race. We have to elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. To ensure our process accounts for male, female, and non-binary candidates, we conferred with our RBC co-chair, our LGBT caucus co-chair, and others to ensure that the process is inclusive and meets the gender balance requirements in our rules. To do this, our process will be slightly different than the one outlined to you earlier this week, but I hope you will see that in practice, it is simple and transparent.
Wow.
Just the interviewer, he thinks this is simple and transparent. What the hell? Like, as opposed to, let's have an election. Let's be honest and fair when we're having this election. If you're white, black, gay, straight, trans, somewhere in between, whatever, God bless you. If you have the opportunity to win it, you have the opportunity to win it. If people think you're the best person for it, people think you're the best person for it. Instead of having that, it's, we will have 1 man, 1 woman, and 1 non-binary, and we will have and it's like, what? And keeps going, by the way.
Yeah.
There's further explanation when he tries to explain it, and it's as clear as mud. And they bring another woman on to try to further explain this process of however they're trying to do with this. Effectively, I guess, trying to have 1 man, 1 woman, and 1 person who's non-binary.
Now, what he was describing, let's be clear, is a quota system.
Yes.
It was a quota system. Now that is a quota system. It wasn't who's ever qualified. We're going to have and in fact, it didn't have to be a quota system because you're just choosing from a pool of candidates. You open it up to a pool of candidates and made the best man, woman, they, their, them, chim, whatever, win. But when you specify that we have to check off boxes in order for you to even be in the nominating pool, that is a quota system. And this is one of the reasons that Democrats lost, because people look at this and they shake their head, they scratch their head. It's like, what? Like and these aren't necessarily people who were in love with Trump, in love with conservative policies. What they said was, "Oh, I'm sick of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sick of that." And even to Frank's point, there are people who weren't just concerned about being called racist. There are men who said, you know what, I'm not a damn sexist because I don't support this, or I don't agree with abortion, or I don't agree. And what the left did, they demonized these people. So what, instead of just focusing on race, Frank's point about that there was a disaffected voter who ended up supporting Donald Trump for a variety of reasons because they were tired of being, not feeling as if they had a place in the Democratic Party and Democratic Party politics. That really is a legitimate conversation to have, because I know people who don't like Donald Trump, who voted for Donald Trump because they said, "Oh no, the whole trans thing, the gender, transgender kids." I know so many men who were like, "Oh no, I ain't rocking with that," and they don't necessarily like Republicans at all. This was the other option. But what Republicans now say, what they need to be mindful of is that this uptick in support. Now, Donald Trump won the popular vote in the Electoral College. This isn't permanent.
That's
So, assuming that you're not going to have to do any of the things that you said you were going to do, once you get past the woke rights stuff, we're talking about bread and butter, meat and potato like issues. When people said that they were concerned about the cost of goods, that is what's going to be on the table in during the midterms. And if the only thing that we have to offer, and then I say we as in Republicans, is that we ended DEI, and with Trump playing around with these taxes, saying and acknowledging that Americans might have to pay a little more. Okay.
Might.
Okay.
They will.
That may work for people of means or middle class Americans, but people like me, and I'm throwing me in this, like who go to the grocery store and say, "I can't pay $7.99 for a dozen of eggs." And I did not buy those eggs because I said, "Oh, hell no. I guess I just won't be eating eggs for a while."
By the way, it would also include pharmaceuticals. That was one of the other things he pointed out. Because he's acting like these tariffs are just going to be in a vacuum. Like, oh yeah, we can pass this stuff and it's not going to happen. In fact, he is putting, what is $1.5 trillion tariffs on $1.5 trillion. Canada, Mexico have vowed to retaliate. China is going to retaliate. He is also now talking about putting sanctions on the European Union, which is, again, this is what I mean. This is like, it's so bizarre.
We didn't vote for this.
Nobody voted.
We didn't vote for this. Sorry, nope. We didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for this, which is why I'm disappointed that they're not more succinct in their messaging. Or like, how do you think that this is good? Like, how do you think that, you know what? We're making some moves. Well, I can tell you why, because for one, you're listening to Elon and you're listening to all of these people online who essentially slut. Oh, can I say that? I probably can say that.
You can say it.
Who slut themselves out for Elon's attention, where they ingratiate. I mean, you're talking about members of Congress now tagging Elon Musk, thanking members of Congress, thanking Elon Musk, the unelected billionaire bureaucrat, for his work. And Elon doesn't have to be accountable to anything or anybody because he doesn't work for the government, for the people who have for years talked about the influence of people like George Soros, the billionaire George Soros. He's getting these prosecutors, these DAs hired, these woke DAs hired in places all around the country for the party, for the movement. So concerned about that, they have no problem with a billionaire technocrat, genius as he is, essentially dominating and who seems to be leading U.S. government policy. They have no problem with that because they say he's one of us. Elon Musk ain't one of us. Elon Musk is an opportunist. At the beginning of last year, up until probably May, Elon Musk was supporting Ron DeSantis. In 2023, Elon was saying that Donald Trump needed to sail on into the sunset. It wasn't until June, the day that Donald Trump, of his first assassination attempt, that Elon then supported Donald Trump. But this was after, and I'm sure everybody remember, because so in the bag was he for Ron DeSantis. Remember Ron DeSantis's announcement on Twitter that was a total bust.
Right.
This is that same Elon Musk. So in love were, you know how I felt about Vivek Ramaswamy, and I always said he acted like a surrogate for Donald Trump during the primary. So in love was everybody with Vivek Ramaswamy, who, to his credit, was a staunch supporter of Donald Trump.
He was.
He was kicked out of Doge and ain't nobody thought nothing of him. Now he says that, well, it's because of Hatch Act and I plan to run for governor. Bruh, please.
Mm-mm.
They kicked you out. They kicked you out after you started going after Americans on this whole H-1 visa debate, basically calling Americans lazy. They kicked you out because of that. It ain't got nothing to do with you wanting to run for governor because you're not a federal government employee. So the Hatch Act don't even apply to you because Doge is not even a federal, it's a commission that Donald Trump has empowered.
Just to be clear, not just Americans, white Americans, meaning these same people who, the Steve Bannons of the world, the Hegeseths of the world, all of these people who talk about DEI and everything else, Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, two foreigners, effectively pointed out these white people are unqualified. They aren't energetic enough. They don't know enough. And so we need to go outside the country in order to get, of the foreigners and bring them into the country because they're hungry and they're educated, that can do the jobs and they're brilliant. Yeah, they felt some kind of way about that.
We're concerned about prom kings and queens, and that's what we do. And despite America's innovation, over just America's history with innovation, somehow we're just concerned about the prom king and all of this type of stuff. It was a caricature of Americans that he leaned into, and the people around him said he got to go. And I know because they told me, despite what Elon Musk says, despite what Vivek Ramaswamy may say, that whole conversation around the H-1B visa debate is why he's no longer at Doge, a agency that he helped co-found with Elon Musk. And notice, you don't see people talking about Vivek Ramaswamy. He tried to go on this kind of podcast tour or something, and now conservatives, these same social media influencers, are distancing themselves for Vivek because they have no more use for him. They have no more use for him. And the fact that people aren't saying, well, what happened to Vivek Ramaswamy? Why aren't we talking about him? Elon Musk is an opportunist, and he can decide next month, I'm over this. I'm a billionaire. I don't need money. I don't need any of this. I am over it. I don't like Donald Trump. Elon Musk wants access. He don't care about money. He doesn't even care about relationship. Elon Musk is solely concerned about access to the most powerful person in the world and what that access brings him as far as his bottom line. He wants all the data. He wants all of this. This is what Elon Musk wants. He is not sincere in this America First movement. No, Elon is about Elon.
Yeah, not even American. Steve Bannon is right. And his take on Elon Musk. I look, you and I share an opinion on this. I fully believe everything you're saying on this one is right. He's an opportunist. The Washington Post, and I'll let you go after this. The Washington Post apparently put out that Elon Musk donated or invested $288 million into Donald Trump's campaign. This is a hell of a lot more than what we were even aware of going into the election. That's assuming the Washington Post is correct. Hell, even if that number is 100 million, that is a lot of money to invest in somebody. And again, the reason you're doing that is because the access is worth more than the money that you're effectively investing into the person. The USA thing, for example, is a really good example. Elon Musk doesn't have any top secret clearances, and yet he is going to USAID and looking, basically trying to get access to behind the scenes files. Apparently he's running the Treasury Department. Where does he get the capability to do this? There's nothing under the law that effectively allows this. Donald Trump has just willed this into action because of his association.
And there are going to be some lawsuits coming up soon because Elon Musk now has access to Treasury's payment system.
Yes.
The senior career official at Treasury resigned because he refused to give Elon Musk access to that information. And there was a standoff. He ended up resigning because now the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, gave Elon Musk that access. This Elon Musk, and I don't know if you saw the tweet from Donald Trump on yesterday saying that he was going to stop funding going to Africa because of what's happening in Africa, South Africa, where the land owner, the whole story is, there's been a history of this, but what the story is apparently, allegedly, is that white South Africans, at least according to them, are having their land confiscated and stuff. And so Donald Trump tweets out that because certain groups in South Africa are being impacted, that he's going to stop all funding to South Africa. Who's South African? Who is the South African that Donald Trump knows?
Elon
Who is the white?
I pointed this out once before. Like I've met white South Africans, and some of them thought that the system was better under apartheid. And then you get Elon Musk going out there giving Nazi salutes and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I don't think that stuff is random at all. I mean, he is effectively trying to boost the AFD, trying to get them elected. And look, from my point of view, the AFD has merit in regards to the way that the liberal class has effectively ran the country into the ground. So, this is not me being entirely ideological about it. Germany chooses whoever Germany wants. But I'm pointing out that I don't think it's a coincidence that he is boosting the AFD, saying, hey, you should be proud of your German heritage, and then is out there giving full-blown Nazi salutes. I mean, like, hand on his chest, thrusting his hand out. It's like, okay, dude, you know what that is. Don't give me this nonsense that, oh, he's autistic, he doesn't know any nonsense. And now he's effectively going after South Africa because the ANC has a mandate in order to reform the wealth distribution in South Africa, something, by the way, that they've been failing to do. And they've been failing to do it to such a degree that you've got the group that was the segregationists that have been able to worm their way back into the ANC government at this point. I mean, they may be calling it a unity government, but for all intents and purposes, that group had been locked out of the political process for like 30 years. The public wanted them to do their job. It was a revolutionary movement that won in regards to overturning the apartheid system. They have not. And
the irony of this, you guys go and look at Donald Trump's statement on this whole South Africa thing, is that he's concerned about how people who live in another part of the world are being treated, allegedly.
White people.
However, when it comes to the Palestinians, though, because we're concerned about how people around the world are being treated, unless you are then Palestinian. It's because we don't care what Israel does, which is why none of the funding cuts, none of the foreign aid will impact Israel. You're so concerned about and Donald Trump, who, and many people around him who are the non-interventionists, have no problem saying, well, I'm going to stop, even though it's not going to happen. Because I think Congress has to get involved in that in order for it to happen. But he just says, I'm going to stop funding to Africa because white farmers in South Africa are being impacted.
It's so
you talking about saying the quiet part out loud. Donald Trump has never been concerned. Donald Trump actually invested money into South Africa when it comes to AIDS, HIV, AIDS treatment and all of this type of stuff. I never heard Donald Trump, even during the campaign, talk about South Africa, but now you can connect the dots. Elon Musk is white and South African, and I don't think that he was a naturalized U.S. citizen until his 30s or something. This is all Elon Musk, and what's going to end up happening, and I've said it before, Elon Musk will be the death of Donald Trump. And I don't mean that in a physical way. I think that he will pull Donald Trump in such a direction that it will be disastrous for his presidency, because Donald Trump, whether he sees it or not, Donald Trump is allowing Elon to go well beyond what any commission should do. But what's going to happen, much like we saw with the judges saying, okay, well, I'm going to block this plan that you have for ending federal aid. You're going to see a lot of lawsuits, and you're going to see some decisions by court saying, no, Doge, you cannot do that. And maybe that's part of the strategy. Donald Trump just want to get it to the courts to get Elon. I don't know. But he's going to be the death of Donald Trump's administration, because he means Donald Trump and his administration no good. It is all about his bottom line.
It's purely about what is good for Elon, and nothing more. Man, always appreciate talking to you, my man. I was going to show the clip, but we don't have to show it. We have already talked about it. Melik Abdul, the man himself. He is a,
and I'll tell you, I'll be back on CNN Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Oh man! If you keep showing
I'll be back.
Good job, man.
Look, that's what they need to do. You know, I'm still unemployed.
Yeah. And look, that's how I got his Sputnik, right? It's like if I keep showing my face in here, somebody got to say, "Who's that Negro and why?" Like,
oh, and tell your mom I said hello, by the way.
I will. In fact, she was the one who hit me up. She was like, Melik is killing it on CNN. I was like, really? And then when I finally saw Frank Lunt's video, I was like, Melik is killing it on CNN. He is handling his business. I was like, go ahead. Melik Abdul is a political analyst, writer, and Republican strategist with over 15 years of public and private sector experience. My man, keep holding it down, man. You have a good one.
I will. All right. See you, Jamal.
All right, my man.